of Veritone, and then Dr. Rena Walsinger from Beyond Reality coming here. It's going to be a panel type event. So scan the QR code if you want to come. Now we're going to introduce our speaker and our moderator. Please welcome Tony Crisp.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for showing up tonight. I am the substitute moderator tonight. And I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Dylan Watkins. So Dylan Watkins is a serial entrepreneur and the CEO of Reality Smash. He aims to help businesses succeed in the rapidly evolving AI landscape by providing custom AI tools, master classes, and a mastermind group for entrepreneurs. And maybe you guys will get a free membership tonight at the end, we'll see. Dylan has designed AI solutions for various industries and uses a human-centered design approach with the RISE framework to successfully implement AI technologies. He's also a recognized influencer on his TikTok channel, podcast host, and speaker on AI, VR, and the future of technology. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, happy to be
Yeah,
here.
and Dylan's been a part of our community for years. I mean, I don't know, back in the day, like...
Yeah, we went way back.
Yeah.
When we had hair.
But Dylan's always been, I mean, he's the pioneer. He's always out there, finding the new technologies, and he comes back to our community and shares what he learned, and it's been fantastic. So thank you very much for helping us busy entrepreneurs understand what's coming next.
And this has been a great ecosystem. I remember coming here bright-eyed when I was really young, and it's a great ecosystem. We can learn and grow and find the edges. And that's the thing, is like a lot of times you get a bright idea, you go into a cave, and then you disappear, and then you don't really connect with anybody. You hold your idea to be so valuable. But one of the best things you ever can do is just show that ugly baby, get that out the door, and get his feedback as quick as possible. And that's what this place is about. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Right, so Dylan, as a successful serial entrepreneur, I'd like to know, what inspired you to get into what I know at VR and now with AI, and how did you get started with this field?
Yeah, so originally, I had another business, and then I tried out VR a decade ago when Oculus came into the Kickstarter, put it on, mind was blown, said, okay, this is the thing, this is where I'm gonna get into. Had that feeling, fell in love with the technology, and then I sold my other business, burned the bridge, jump in with both feet, get into that space. I started running events like meetup groups, and it was OCVR. So I ran a lot of hackathons. If you guys are familiar with that, we did it for like UCI, MIT, USC, a bunch of different groups. And then I started playing with all the different advanced techs like AI. So I had an AI investment for a while. I was working on in-person interactions in the hospitality space. I had an investment for that, really get that deep into AI. Then COVID hit, and all in-person interactions in the hospitality space went away, and all that stuff went away. But then when ChatGPT came out, I had that same feeling. Like, I don't know if anybody here, raise your hand if you tried VR. You put VR on. Okay, so if you've had that VR moment where you put it on, your mind's blown at what's possible, right? You're like, oh, this is possible. ChatGPT gave me that same feeling when you got inside of it for the first time, but instead of all of the friction of VR, you just type away and then your mind's blown at the possibilities. I knew that this was gonna shift, the same way that VR shifted the whole ecosystem, that ChatGPT was going to do the same thing. So then I just doubled down with that, and I went from being a VR company that has some AI to being an AI-focused company that does VR.
Okay, interesting. So if you take a look at, excuse me, if you take a look at the Gartner Hype Cycle, which is a model that describes the adoption of new technologies over time, would you agree with Gartner that AI is currently in what they call the peak of inflated enthusiasm in this hype cycle? And what factors do you think are driving its adoption?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So there's absolutely hype, but there's at the same time, there's also this really advanced value prop. So there's a couple things going on here in the situation. So one, because there's such low friction to get into the space, like anybody knows how to use chat, right? And so essentially this chat window that people are familiar with, what they don't understand on the back of that is like a rocket ship. And so you've got this like little like Winnebago of a shell of the chat window, the front end, with a rocket ship on the back end. And the thing is, if you want to make anything be successful, any application, any software, any technology you're ever making, the number one thing that you need to do is you need to make your user feel awesome. You make your user feel that they are awesome. You make them feel like a superhero. You give them powers, you give them abilities, and that's the number one thing that ChatGPT can do. It's a 10xer. So for me, with Mish, I met with him and I said, hey, got ChatGPT, let's make you something. So in less than 15 minutes, I wrote a stem cell book for him so that he could give to his clients. I don't know anything about stem cells whatsoever, but in 15 minutes I was able to make it, give it to him, and then I felt valuable because I felt awesome and super important to what I could do. Now it's a 10xer. If I'm a 1xer, it can bring me to 10. If I'm already an 8 at it, it can bring me to 80. And that's the power of it, is any technology that makes you feel awesome is the thing that's going to stick around for the long time.
So do you think, so VR didn't continue the way that it was expected. How is this different than what happened with VR?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's two things with that. The thing with VR, it's incredible, but the friction is really high to use it. The issue is that you got to put something on your head and you got to do this, which then shuts you out from the world. Now the technology is advancing. It's gone far. I think like 6 million concurrent users at any given time using the technology. And so if you look at it, the adoption rates are really high. But you have to own a VR headset. It takes you outside of your looping patterns. And if you look at why ChatGPT is so powerful, is that if you want to get someone to adopt a new habit, and any type of new technology, anything you're doing, you don't just completely reinvent the wheel and say, hey, you're doing something completely different here, right? You can't do that. You have to find out what are their habitual patterns, and then you bolt on your application, your services into their patterns, right? So whatever it is that they do, if they come home frustrated and they're burnt out of shape, and then what do? They're gonna have some sort of activity. They could go and binge watch TV or Netflix, or they could use your app. You build a product into that cycle. The thing with VR is when you build it in that cycle, you have to go out of your way to get the headset, to put it on, go like this, turn it on, and there's a lot of steps in the process. Versus ChatGPT, you can pull it out of your pocket, you can go here. The friction's really low, and anytime anybody has a thing, they're used to, say, Google searching, right? Because there's 3 levels of this, but going to Google searching for answers, now you do ChatGPT and you skip the search and you go right to the answers. So it took that typical habit pattern, and now it just has a quicker, better, faster model built on top.
Okay. Interesting. Do you think, is there any tie-in with ChatGPT now lifting VR?
Oh yeah, 100%.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I part of my business, right, is I consult with people on how to use the technology, and then also we build it and integrate it. And so if you look at, what I say is that we live in 3 realities. That's one of the things I talk about, is we live in the reality of this physical world that we live in right now, physical environment. Like right now we're sitting in these chairs having this good time. We live in an internal world, where we're at internally, our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, our internal monologues. And then we live in the social world, a world that we are sharing together. So me and you are currently co-creating this experience, as well as everybody else here. So those are 3 realities we live in. Virtual reality is incredible because it can pull you out of this reality into another one, right? So you can recreate, you can be anywhere, any place, anytime, anyone. So you put the headset on and you're gone. The only issue is that sometimes it's very, very lonely to be inside of that existence unless there's people inside of there to share it with. One of the most powerful things that ChatGPT can do is that you can plug that onto avatars and you can give them an existence, you can give them an experience, so you can populate it with almost like a Sims reality that you can live in, to where now by yourself, you're now able to experience, not only with yourself, going inside a world with this virtual reality, but you also can share it with these ChatGPT avatars that are running around that you're communicating with. And that's a lot of ways that we're using with our clients.
But even with that, if I go into VR and I'm interacting with a ChatGPT powered avatar, I'm going to know it's artificial, right? I'm not going to feel the authenticity of it. Or am I wrong?
There's two sides to that. So they did a study back in the day where they said they put people underneath an MRI machine, and they said, I want you to think about your best friend. And they saw the parts of your brain that lit up, right? And they said, oh great. And they said, okay, I want you to think about the show, this was back in the day, Friends, right? And they put that on, and they saw that the same part of the brain lit up. You never met Ross from Friends. It wasn't a thing, it wasn't a place. It was just a digital pixels on a screen that was there. You can form emotional relationships with anything there, right? With anything that you have an experience with. I'll challenge you, if anybody has a VR headset and they want to go check out something, there's an experience called VR Girlfriend. It is a very PC. This is not X-rated. This is a different conversation. Different conversation. Different conversation.
There's so many lonely people in the world. This is genius.
Yeah.
This is genius.
Yeah. It's the Tinder for people that don't want to talk to people. Yeah. But it's an experience. So there's a thing called VR Girlfriend. You can go on a bunch of benign dates with a girl where you play rock, paper, scissors, you throw darts, you do experiences like that with them. And I did this back in the day, trying this experience out, and I was like, oh my God, and at the very end, she's trying to find this lost item. It's Sunday, you need to go around and help her find this item. And she went to go leave, and then she came back to give me a hug, and I was like, oh, I went to give her a hug. I was like, oh my God, this is bro. I was like, oh my God, if there was like 1,000 of these experiences, you wouldn't want to leave the house, because right now, people are already connecting with computers a lot more. But at the same time, it can actually benefit you. There are ways that it can actually enhance the experience, because one of the most powerful things about it, it's a safe place to practice something difficult. And that's some of the work that I've been doing with a couple of the clients that I can get into later.
Yeah, interesting. Just kind of dive a little deeper into that. What are some of the risks you see in having that type of experience with this artificial? When you talk about loneliness, right? I mean, do you see like the downside of this? Like,
sure. Yeah. So in terms of this, here's the issue. Technology is just a magnification of the person's intent. You can go onto YouTube and pretty much get a degree, like a Harvard degree, by just studying YouTube. You can get a better education by just studying YouTube videos in this educational period, because right now in this time field, it's available. That content is online right now. Some of the best psychology I ever see is on TikTok, but you have to seek it. The issue is that humans, while we admire the hero, we admire the growth, we want to be that person that's charging at the front, that's got the big muscles, super successful, that has it, because we know how hard that is. At the same time, we're lazy monkeys. We want the easiest path possible. And so if you choose to go down that path, and you choose to say and lose yourself in that reality, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to magnify that intent. So you have to willfully choose and carve your path using this technology to magnify the intent of who you want to be.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you for that. Let me ask this. So as an expert as talking about human-centered design, how can early-stage entrepreneurs apply this approach to their work with AI and automation? And what are some of the best practices and tips that you can share?
Yeah, totally. So right now with AI, it can automate things, but you need to nail it, then scale it, especially with startups and all things that we're talking about right now, is you have to understand, get really clear on human behavior. ChatGPT is great because it's a language model and it simulates conversations. It's really good at that type of stuff, but the better you understand your customer's problem, you get clear with them, you understand their needs, their wants, their desires, their fears, all those types of things, you can design patterns of behavior that serve them, that fit their needs, right? And by studying them, by studying their pains and their problems, the possibilities, you can then automate behind that. So the thing is, people want AGI. AGI is artificial general intelligence, where I can tell you to do anything and it will just run out and go do it. And right now, kind of does that. It's a little janky, it could be a whole talk. But if you understand your customer's problem, you can build AI automation tools to streamline that pathway. And there are a ton of them out there right now. You can go and work with ChatGPT, you can plug into large language models, you can automate any of these processes, but the number one thing you could do, I'd say more than anything, is figure out what avatar you want to serve. Meet with them. Paper prototype out their pathways and what their problems are. Figure out where they're going, then go back in the ChatGPT and then figure out what is the thing that you can do to solve that pain with automation. In what ways? For example, are you difficult with booking calls, right? So maybe you just want a bunch of people to show up and have conversations with you. So one of the things that we've built before is it's a text bot that has conversations that gets butts in seats. So you can then just line up all the calls. It will then message a bunch of people and then put butts in the seats so you can go up and meet up with them. That's solving one problem, which is the back and forth communication with getting people in front of you so that you can do the art of selling and art of communication. So just figuring out what the problems are and then using AI to automate those processes.
Would that be part of your RISE framework that you use? Or is that something different?
RISE is my methodology for really helping someone become an AI-powered entrepreneur. From what I've seen is this. Most of the people, they're what I call techno-optimists. They can smell it. They know that it's huge. They know that it's here. They've missed previous waves in the past. They maybe have missed the internet wave or the Google wave or any of the other waves that have come along, and they don't want to miss this wave. But they're not technical enough. They don't know what they don't know in the space. And because it's so evolving so quickly, it's got to be a full-time job to see what's possible. So the RISE method is really meeting with them and recognizing what are the gaps. in your business? What are the things that you need to have fulfilled on? Where are the blank spots? Is it getting leads? Is it fulfillment? Is it difficult conversations? What does that look like? And then I innovate with them and I strategize. And so I say, based upon your pain and your problem with recognizing those gaps, we innovate on solutions, then we strategize on how best to integrate those solutions, which is the RIS strategy, and then we implement and execute that, right? Oftentimes what happens is people typically they'll go in, they go, oh my God, this is amazing. And it reminds me of this one kid. I was in Thailand with my wife a couple of months ago, and there was a kid by himself at a buffet, and there was a stack this high of desserts, just empty desserts, just top to bottom, and he was just sitting there on his phone playing his video games with a stack of desserts. I'm like, that kid's living his best life. You know what I'm saying? But that's what happens with people with ChatGPT. They get in, they start to use it a whole bunch, they eat a whole bunch of it, they get amazed by it, and they go, oh, now what? And then they just walk away with an upset stomach, right? So you need to have a process to go through and recognize the gaps, and then strategically implement new innovation so you get that one success. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed at the possibility, and then you get paralysis by analysis. You're like, I can't worry about this. I got to work on it, and then you'll find something else to fill your time.
Well, as you're going through this, so the RISE frame, can you explain what those acronyms, the letters of the acronym stand for?
Sure. R for recognize the gaps. So what's the gaps in your company? What do you need to fill with AI? And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. I, innovate. Right? So what's the innovation? What's out there? Because they don't know what they don't know. What are all the tools? Imagine you're trying to build a house and you don't know that there's a hammer, right? And so, okay, so we say, okay, here's all the tools that are out there, right? How do we put these things together in a unique way? Strategize, okay, we're not just gonna go ahead and just bring them in. Strategy, when, where, how, crawl, walk, run. What do we look like? How do we bring this in so that we can show that this is successful? And okay, now that we have a strategy and not just isn't the tool cool, right? Because that's what happens a lot of times. I've seen this with VR. You go, that's amazing, but if you don't know how it's going to make you money, if you don't know how it's going to save you time, if you don't know how it's going to benefit you in some different way, you go, that's cool. You walk away. So the strategy is how do you turn innovation into applied innovation, right? And then like applied innovation, UCI, and then you take that and you execute that and you implement it into your company.
How are a lot of people who are trying to implement AI in their organizations now doing it wrong? Like, if they're not going through a process like RISE, what are they doing, and what are some of the missteps that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things is one, there's a couple of different things going on here. In the companies, you have this. One is people just trying to figure it out all on their own. Some people, because this is evolving at such a fast rate. I mean, if you look, imagine you're a business owner and you went into a coma and it's been 8 months. You pop up, it's been 8 months, right? The whole world's different with ChatGPT. It's the fastest growing app ever, 100 million users in 60 days. It's incredible. It's evolving at such a fast rate that you need to know all the things you need the lay of the land. So what happens is somebody will see one thing, they'll get excited by it, and then they'll just try to bulldoze through a solution with that one thing without realizing what are all the things right now, and then understanding that how do we get a small successful win to solve a problem? And that's the two areas. Is one, they don't know the lay of the land, and then two, they don't know how to integrate these things in a way that actually solves one problem so that they can either save time or make money, right? They just kind of get overwhelmed and then they back off.
Okay, good. Let me ask this. So, what would be some of the key skills or knowledge areas that early stage entrepreneurs need to develop to be successful in AI and automation? Are there any specific courses or resources that you would recommend?
TikTok, be a great one. I recommend it.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Concentrated information. It can be very helpful. There's a bunch of, I know some people like, oh, it's just people dancing, which it is there. It's at the same time.
So I got this moderation position on Monday. I've been binge watching Dylan's TikToks for the past 2 days, and I've learned so much.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic. But carry on.
Yeah. So there's a reason why everyone uses TikTok. It's concentrated value nuggets. The concentrated value nuggets of whatever you seek. There's people dancing, but there's also, AI and all that other stuff. The point being on this one is, what can you do to go through those? There's a couple different pieces that would be good. So one is to understand the technology by looking, say, at TikToks and YouTubes, following influential thinkers. Because this is such a hot market and a burning space, and this didn't really exist, like 6 months ago, that right now there's emerging experts, lay of the land, and there's a lot of disruption going on. And so I would try to find different pockets of knowledge, little communities of people that are all sharing this, because I had a guy on my podcast one time, his name's Walter Greenleaf. He's I think the director of innovation over at Stanford Interaction Lab. And he said that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And it's like lights going on at the night, and so when it gets dark, these lights all kind of pop at the same time. And what you're trying to find these pockets of knowledge where these obsessed people are learning and growing and evolving at an advanced rate. That's part of the reasons why I have the TikToks, and part of the reasons why I do the podcast, part of the reasons why I have the mastermind, is you want to hive mind with people. Because one of my fundamental beliefs is this, is that humanity's greatest superpower is to use technology to collaborate through space and time. It's one of the best things that we can do. Right? The reason why we've been able to dominate this planet, it's not because we're individually strong, it's that collectively we can go out, learn, adapt, grow, come back, and evolve together. And if you stack that on top with ChatGPT, the results can be exponential.
Well, let's stay there a little bit. So where are those pockets? Where are those little bright lights of communities? I mean, you mentioned TikTok. And maybe are there some hashtags we can follow there?
A hashtag ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. You'd look for, say, ChatGPT influencers, AI influencers. You can check Twitter under that reference. You can check Instagram's got some. YouTube's got them. Subreddits, subreddit ChatGPT, subreddit Singularity. There's all these social media areas where people are gathering that you can go and find those pockets of people. And then usually at those top level, there'll be smaller subcategories of people that will then form smaller, tighter units that they can get in there. But that would be the front-facing areas of online public social communities to see where they're at. And then they always go deeper from there.
Okay. How about what's happening with like Discord or Facebook groups?
Yeah.
LinkedIn groups.
So I have a Facebook group. It's not as active. Most people are shilling stuff on there. They just throw out a bunch of like, buy my 57,000 prompts and all this types of stuff, which I think is a racket. If you see a bunch of prompts that you could buy, don't buy them, because it's not about having like 1,000 different prompts. You want to have like one prompt that solves a problem, right? You want to figure out that issue and then use that thing to solve that problem. I've recently launched Discord. Discord is much more common for people to get in and communicate. So Discord groups are good. There's a couple of them out there. They're just different groups of people. So I think there's one called the AI Exchange is one of them. Another one's called Tribe. I just started mine called ChatGPT for Me, where you can put all the resources and you have a hive mind of people that are inside of there. So
maybe you can share some of these at the end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see, in terms of, so what are some exciting trends or developments that you're seeing in the field of AI and automation, and how can we stay up to date on them?
For sure. So, does anybody know the difference between AI and AGI when I say that? Yeah? Please.
So artificial intelligence is just is the idea of using any sort of technique to solve a problem, in a way, it's artificial. When it's AGI, it's general intelligence, where you were trying to then say it can solve any problem I give it. AI is trained for one particular problem.
Well put. So where we're at right now is there's one task, one thing, one system. If you look at computers, they are general computers, which means they can generally do a bunch of different stuff. That's why computers were amazing. Steve Jobs has a great talk about this, about how he talked about how computers, he looked at this, I think Science Magazine or something came out, and it talked about the efficiency to move a kilometer. How many calories does it take to burn? It said the condor was the number one animal on the planet that could go the distance with the amount of energy it take to go 1 kilometer. And humans came not very impressively in the middle, right? Until you gave a human a bicycle. And then it could completely outstrip any other animal on the planet. And what he said is that computers are basically bicycles for the mind. And they allow you to go farther, faster, better because of that. If you look at this technology, AI, I truly believe if Steve Jobs was around today, he would be completely in. He would not let Bill Gates outdo him. He would go all in on this front. And the reason being is that AI right now does one linear thing. AGI, artificial general intelligence, to your point, it can do a bunch of different things. But the way that you can do that is you have one AI connect to a whole bunch of other ones. So ChatGPT has a new thing. It's in early access called ChatGPT plugins. It allows you to plug into a bunch of different other systems to have that one AI, ChatGPT, take a bunch of actions online. For example, I have early access because I'm a developer with them and we have stuff and things. And so one of the things that I did is, okay, give me a paleo recipe based upon my favorite restaurants in this area of Yelp. And so I want you to pull up my favorite paleo restaurants in the local area, give me those ingredients lists, and then I want you to order it on Instacart. And then I just told ChatGPT that, and I plugged into those AIs. I said send. It then said, okay, here's some recipes. Here's what you got. It then connected to Instacart, went, ordered that, and I just hit confirm. And then the next morning showed up, and then there was my meal. There was my items, right? So that one item, that one AI can do many different ones. There's another one. So that one's ChatGPT. I'm gonna have one other one, and we'll open it up.
Okay.
Another one that is another one called AutoGPT. AutoGPT is another version of this, and if you go to my TikTok, I show you how to set it up on what that looks like. But what it can do is, instead of going Google search, ChatGPT does answers, AGI or this AutoGPT does goals. So what you say is, hey, for example, when I had AutoGPT set up, I said, I want you to search the web for all things related to AutoGPT, and then I want you to turn it into a TikTok script. And it said, okay, give me a couple of those goals. It said this, and this. Okay, so then it spun off, it went, it searched the web, it then searched for a couple of articles, it summarized those articles, it broke down those articles, wrote it into a TikTok script, and then broke it down for me, then gave me a couple of awesome hooks for the top. I said, oh, great. And so then I had that, and then I did my TikTok on how I use AutoGPT to make an AutoGPT article on that topic, right?
So the data set for ChatGPT only goes into a certain date.
Yes.
Right. So now,
yes.
with what you're saying, does that open up
Yes.
all the current data as well?
Yes, and so pros and cons, right? ChatGPT 4 was trained on September to 2022, right? That's the most, or 2021, one of those two. That's the data it has. Then it has no more internet data. After that, it stops, right? Can't search the internet. AutoGPT right now can actually search the internet on current topics. Now, the thing about AutoGPT, it's a little complex to set up. You have to know Python, and some steps in the process, a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more janky because it's new. It's new technology. It's super popular, but it's new, so it takes a little bit more to get go. It's not as seamless as ChatGPT, but the beautiful thing about it is that you have access to that most recent data, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. And what I just gave you an example of was just one thing of many things that it can do. And so, because of that, just so anybody knows, probably next week I'm going to be releasing my own SaaS model version of AutoGPT. So if you don't want to set it up, you don't want to go through the process, and all you want to do is pay me money.
Nice.
Big problem, small solution, easy solution. You can go and sign up.
So is something like this early stage entrepreneur that have a startup, if I was looking for current data, ChatGPT, I'm assuming wasn't as valuable, but now it finally is.
Yeah. Yeah, it gives you more. Yeah, it gives you more access to more recent data. So you got to understand how to use it. It's yes, essentially, this gives you access to more current data and more access to things. And then as people start to work it and upgrade the models, it will get better over time. But then ChatGPT will come out with plugins which will have certain benefits. Mm-hmm. The pros and cons between the two is that ChatGPT is like Google meets the App Store, right? The Apple App Store. It's all in one, and it does this. And this is going to be the future of the internet, where things are going. Right? AutoGPT, where I see people are going to have their own individual, companies are going to have their own individual versions of AutoGPT, but it's for my own company. And it does certain bells and whistles. Like, I want you to go online, look at all these influencers, pull their names down, tell me how many followers they have, grab their contact information, and then sign into a little box. Right? That's one way that you can use AutoGPT that ChatGPT doesn't like doing.
So what are, like, early stage entrepreneurs, what are some of the 2 or 3 things that we can implement immediately, you think?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, the short answer, implementing immediately, is one, get in ChatGPT, get up and using it, get up and going. That's one of the things that you can do right now. The other one is you can see if you can get access to the plugin store for ChatGPT because it's up and running. everyone's technical abilities are going to be very different. So if you're a programmer, go figure out auto GPT kind of stuff. If you're not, if you're a biz dev, it's going to be better to fall in love with the problem over the solution. So the number one thing I would say is this, and this is what I did originally, is get very good at ChatGPT. Study it, understand it, go through the TikToks and wherever else you want to go to kind of practice it, and then start messaging people and say, hey, I'm here to solve your problem, and I'm here to solve your problem with ChatGPT. How can I help? And then you just grab people in and you just start seeing if you can solve their problems. As one of the things I did on my podcast, I occasionally, I'll bring people on, and in real time, I'll work with them on how to use ChatGPT to solve their problems, and I'll coach them and guide them through a whole experience. For example, I recently turned 40, and my wife took me on a surprise, and the surprise was thought we were going to go hiking, and we ended up skydiving. I only found out the skydiving place, right? And so the whole way there, I got from finding out to being on the plane, it was 30 minutes. 30 minutes from being on the plane. And so I'm strapped up to this big and cuddly teddy bear of a man, and all I could do to not freak out was like, hey man, do you know anything about ChatGPT? Let's talk about it. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to start my own business. Like, oh, you should come on my podcast, that'd be great. Right? And so we got thrown on the plane, it was fine. I screamed like a girl, it was awesome. And then I had him on the podcast, and you can see me, I coach and guide him in the process of helped him come up with an idea, a landing page, create the things, create steps for him and guidance. And you can kind of see real-time activity of how I worked with someone to try to solve their problems, understand where he's at, recognize his gap, and then innovated and strategized to implement that into his company so that he could use that to start his business.
That's awesome. So that's the positive side. How about like challenges or risks that you see?
Yeah.
What have you experienced that we can learn from it, and how can we apply it?
Yeah. Sure. So there's a bunch of things to be concerned about. One, no job is safe. This technology, it's not that the AI is going to replace you, but whoever decides to adopt and integrate the AI will replace you because they're just going to be able to do more than you. And anybody is going to then say, hey, you can do the job of 10, so I'm going to choose you, whatever the person might be. So that's one piece, is you need to evolve with the technology along the way. That's one piece of the adapting with the times. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner or something like that, you're really going to want to have this in your business. Otherwise, your competition is going to outpace you. I remember trying to I was running down the street the other day, and I saw a car, and I tried to race the car with my feet, and it just went right by, and I was like, well, that was silly. And I realized that that's the same thing that people are going to do with ChatGPT. The people that don't use it, they've got that unfair advantage. That's one piece. In terms of the other scary things, it can replicate behavior. It can replicate voices. So if you get a phone call from, say, your son, and your son's like, hey, I'm in prison, come send me a bunch of money to this wireless account. People can go online, and you can go and voice clone people's voices by if they have a voice on anywhere, they can take that voice, upload it, create a digital copy of that voice, and then they can pretend to be you and then try to scam people out of your money. So you're going to want to have safe words and things like that. So that's one of the scary places. Another one is like Drake, the artist. His voice got cloned, and then they got made into a song. That song was very, very popular. So they basically took his voice and then used his brand and his message to recreate that, to then get all the eyeballs for it. And so this area is going to
Can't you just get royalties from that?
I mean, figuring it out, right? I mean, if they maybe it'd be smart to work out a deal. He doesn't do like the Metallica Napster thing, right? Just figure out how he could actually monetize it. Might be a better move. So there's that piece of it, of the impersonation and of the creation of other people's technologies. Those are going to be some of the major concerns coming up with that. There's more down the pipe about like ethical use cases with it, but then it comes down to like with any technology. It's just a magnification of the human intent, and all you can do is really go down the path that serves you and enhances you, and us try to legislatively try to put rules in place so that we can kind of have a do no harm policy.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I have one more question. We'll open it up to Q&A. So finally, do you have advice for early stage entrepreneurs who are interested in pursuing a startup in AI and automation? And what are some steps they can take to get started? And how can they stay motivated and focused on that goal?
Yeah, sure. So anybody that's looking to get into the space, first you have to fall in love with it. You have to be obsessed with it. It's a moving target. So if you're solely doing this because you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna get rich, right? Your motivation will wane over time. You have to really fall in love with both the technology because it's rapidly evolving, and then you have to fall in love with the problem or the avatar of the person that you're serving, right? And so if you fall in love with those two things, then you're going to be obsessed with both those two areas, which then will naturally make you an expert. Because this technology is super new, you can become an expert very, very quickly in the space. Now I had a bit of a head start, right? I'm 10 years in high-end technologies. I've done a lot of things for multiple years, so I have a bit of a head start. But if you quickly, obsessively go into it, I'm going to say something a little controversial here. We're going to go ahead and throw this out here. Is that people generally don't care if you have degrees. It doesn't really matter, right? I've run high-end technology hackathons. I've watched many people come into my programs where I train them up on things. At the end of the day, an employer wants to know, show me the work that you've done to get a result. I want that result from you. If you can show me that you can get that result for somebody else, then I'm going to believe you much more than a piece of paper. So if you fall in love with the technology, you fall in love with the problem, and you solve that a couple of times, you can then show, hey, here's the testimony of all these smiling faces, which is known as like a qualitative version of, hey, this stuff works. And then if you do it for a whole bunch of people, you can then show quantitative and say, hey, this is how much money I've made with this many people, and if you give me a dime, I'll give you $1, and then it's a no-brainer, right?
I've learned a lot tonight, just in our conversations. It was very insightful. We really appreciate you coming and sharing everything you learned about AI and ChatGPT.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Let's give Dylan a round of applause. And full disclosure, I actually went into ChatGPT tonight, or today, and I put in all this information about Dylan Watkins, about your LinkedIn and his TikTok, and I asked ChatGPT, hey, in the style of Oprah Winfrey, write me, I go, write me a series of questions that would be a 45-minute Q&A fireside chat with Dylan Watkins, and those are the questions I asked tonight. So, and I learned it from Dylan's TikTok. So I'm curious, so how were the questions?
They were great, yeah, very insightful.
So I learned this from you.
I thought you put a bunch of time into this, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was fantastic. So, right, so now we have some time. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So let's go ahead and open this up to the floor. Who has a question for Dylan? Yeah.
First off, I want to thank you for your time. Very insightful, like you said. I wanted to know if you have any philosophical books or ways to train your mind the way you act and speak in the educational realm. How you became Dylan.
Well, we are all a mosaic of our experiences, right? So every time you meet and you connect with somebody, a little piece of them comes onto you, and you kind of stitch together, who you are, right? Essentially. There's a bunch of different books that I love. I love Audible, so much to the point I think it's kind of an addiction, so I kind of had to delete it because there's just too much audio listening. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is a beautiful book series, right? Alex Hormozy, $100 Million Offer, if you want to take a look at those ones. That's a good series in terms of communication. There's a whole bunch of books, but one of the best things that I ever did, and this would be my recommendation for anybody that wants to be able to kind of learn and grow, is I created a podcast called Heroes of Reality back in the day. I now have a ChatGPT podcast, but I have a Heroes of Reality podcast. And that was based around, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell? No? Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell's a great series. It's basically, Joseph Campbell went all over the world and studied all the myths, cultures, and religions around the world. And he saw a pattern of human storytelling. And it was known as the monomyth, a hero of 1,000 faces. And what happened was he brought it here, wrote a book on it, and a guy named Chris Vogler said, oh, that's amazing, put it in a book, and Hollywood said, oh, that's amazing, and now you see all of those stories told by Walt Disney, George Lucas, and everybody in that space. And that's the story of, there's a young, ordinary person in an ordinary land. They go off on an adventure. They seek some sort of holy grail of treasure. Maybe their place got burned down, so they have to go on a quest. They meet a mentor who gives them a special ability or trains them. They get their butt kicked by a bunch of threshold guardians. They go along the journey. They go through the belly of the whale, which is the other side. Eventually they fight a dragon where they almost die, and then they're reborn as a new self, and then they evolve along the way. That's a story of human growth and human potential. It's something that we love as society, right? And it's a circle, but it's more of a spiral of us evolving through time, right? And everybody everybody has their own hero story of who they are and the growth and transformation they had along the way. Because there's two stories. One is you go for the Holy Grail, but two, the more interesting is the emotional journey of who you become along the way. So I became fascinated with those facts and those stories. So what I did is I had a podcast called Heroes of Reality, where my goal was to interview 1,000 heroes in life, technology, and business, all around their hero story, their own hero's quest. And so I interviewed them using the hero's story method, right? Which is, you can look that up, that method. And I got to interview over 200 and something people, where I got to learn these insights. How do you think? How do you operate? How do you feel? What do you believe? What books do you recommend? What does this look like? And after so many of those conversations, I just got, a bit of them bled onto me. So start a podcast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah.
So thank you very much. Yeah, I've totally been blown away by ChatGPT. Been using it for just everything. People providing, business plans, how to consolidate it, how to reorganize it. It's just phenomenal what you can do. And I Python, so I'll do auto GPT here soon. But my question is on the synthetic humans kind of concept. Have you ever watched Tristan Harris, The Social Dilemma? He has a podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and it is about the unintended consequences of the internet. So what I'm asking about is when do we have a moral obligation to let people know it's a synthetic AI, a synthetic chatbot? You said tools can be used for good or for bad. Totally agree, but we've seen many instances where the asymmetry, a bad person can take the technology really, really fast. So how can we include that moral piece to the ChatGPT and what's going, or how do you do it?
Sure, yeah, 100%. A couple sides of that. One being is that morals, there's a series of grays, right? Everyone's got their own moral level, right, where they're at. And it depends on what you're going to be doing with the technology. Part of that is, one, with letting people know. It's always good to let people know up front and be transparent with what's going on in the situation, right? So recommend that you tell everybody. But at the same time, when anybody creates something, there's always someone that's willing to lower their moral standards to get by. The only thing I know is, my belief is this, is that society is a race between utopia and disaster, right? And it's really up to us to co-create the reality that we want in the future by our own actions and our own intentions. I use technology, one, to make money for people that want to make money in space, because it's really important. Because if I serve the right people and I can give them the ability to make a whole bunch of money, and I believe in who they are, then they're going to have a massive impact on this world and have a major benefit. For example, I do work for this one nonprofit. I help them design and build and iterate a platform using VR for social emotional learning. Right, that went through, we got that built, did some amazing work for some struggling kids. That was very successful. There was some AI involved into it, and it was the first round. And then, because that was so successful, the Conrad Hilton gave them a 7-figure check to roll on. And in about 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I'm going back out to where I went before, New Orleans, and I'm bringing an advanced ChatGPT AI VR version of that to help kids have difficult conversations in that space. Right, and because I saw one of the most powerful experiences I've ever seen before, I witnessed last time I was there, and it was with a young African American man named Jalal, and we were in VR, and he got to practice with AI bots for interviews and other difficult conversations and different scenarios in the restaurant space and that stuff. And he said, okay, well, what's the next conversation? What's the hardest conversation? What we call, Joseph Campbell, what is the cave you fear to enter? Because that's where the treasure you seek. And he says, it's with my dad, right? And so, okay, so in that situation, we set up the system, and at the time we put on to where the coach was then an African American man, and said, okay, let's have a conversation. He had a conversation with his dad about not feeling seen, not feeling heard, feeling he's got all these pressures on top of him, don't know what to do. And then at the end of that, we were interviewing him on the post side in the progress, and said, how's this whole program been for you? And what were the results? And he's like, I talked to my dad. I was like, well, what happened? And he's like, he finally listened to me. He finally listened to me. I'm like, how'd that make you feel? And he's like, I got butterflies, yo. Whoa. Right? From that experience, it was in a virtual environment. It was with a digital avatar. This thing wasn't completely quote unquote real, but it gave him the ability to experience it in that reality, to give him this social bravery, to then take it into the reality and then have that powerful conversation to get him to where he wants to go. So at the end of the day, it's what brings you joy, what people do you want to serve, how do you want to create utopia with this technology, right? Because we're all voting with our time, with our attention, with our money, with the reality that we want to co-create together.
So he felt present there and was transformed.
Yeah, he cried. Yeah, the whole thing, he broke through. Yeah,
That kind of answers my previous question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to ask, do you have children?
No.
So you bring up a solid point, because I do, and I'm curious to know at what point do you think, with everything that's going on in the world, with social media and TikTok, and I know you're a big fan, does this have a place in, especially VR, does that have a place, and at what point would you say it's even acceptable for a child to even look at it or explore it? Because of the addictive nature, like I know, I'm curious to go and check out this right now. Like, what does this do? How is this going to impact my business?
Yeah.
But because of that intensity, I feel like in children with TikTok and all of the social media stuff, how do you think that, when do you think this is acceptable for a child to like explore this? There's some kids, my son's friend that's 11 years old, that is completely a genius with computers. This is something he would want to do now. So when would you say like that is an acceptable time? I know that's if you don't have kids, but when do you think that it would be something that you would open up to a child's mind?
Yeah. Well, I'm an uncle, so I have a range of little ones running
Little
around.
ones in your life?
When you're saying, are you talking about ChatGPT? Are you talking about VR? Are you talking about the internet? Are you talking about all of it?
To be honest with you, both, because the access to information and where it could potentially go, and then with VR as well. Like, when do you think a child's mind could potentially be ready for something like this? It's mind blowing to me. I'm 40, so.
Yeah. So a couple things. So with VR, VR, quote unquote, they say for legal reasons you shouldn't be under the age of 13. That's legal reasons for this. I've seen kids going as 8 years old, 9 years old. At that age, they're going online, they're going to different places. There's a game called Gorilla Tag. If you look at it, yeah, okay, so you're very familiar with it. All the kids are playing, they run around like monkeys and they play around. It's a thing, but it's a place for them to go and connect. That's where they go and they form these identities, they form these social bonds, they form the typical interactions that they go through. The thing about kids is that the point of play is to practice real life, right? The point of play is to go in that direction. If you don't want to say no bad, what you want to do is you want to find their interest and then you want to shoot them in that direction and moderate it, right? And so if you understand where their passions are and you can put that as a guide rail, they will naturally propel themselves to where they want to go. Now you have to have guardrails on the edge. So guardrails being, you can turn on the the adult features, any of those types of things. You can put on time constraints on top of the application. You can limit the activity, because if not, part of the challenge with being a parent is that you have to be responsible for the consumption of your child, versus having that kid go to the buffet and eat the 12 different dessert cups all at once by himself, right? I'm sure it was super easy for the parent to go do that. But if you put in place and you say, okay, look, where's the passion? Is it VR? Great, then I'm gonna point them in this direction and let them go down VR and say, what are the benefits? To make connections with friends, to maybe go and explore, be creative. You can find a bunch of different creative activities inside of there's you can do 3D modeling in there, you can do painting, you can do sculpting, you can do circuitry. There's a whole bunch of things that you can guardrail him and point in that direction, because he's already gonna like that technology. Then he's gonna go so much farther faster. Same thing with ChatGPT. You want to let them go down that path, but at the same time, you want to have some sort of mantra on. So say, hey, you can't watch it after this many hours. You can't do this, and then you just create the container for them to be creative.
Awesome. I didn't know if you could put restrictions on for children.
Yeah.
Either one of these.
Meta app, you can do parent mode. You can put restrictions on type of that. On your computer, you can always put on limiting access. I can't think of that right now, but there's a thing that's like downtime or something like that. So after so much use and so much time, things will shut down. And so what you just need to do is just limit that behavior, and then really, say, hey, you understand the fun's over here, and then you point them in front and say, okay, if you want to be able to do this, you've got to go through these sciencey things and this VR learning and education. You let them naturally create a game out of it, and if you can make it into a game for them, they'll play that game all day long. Yeah.
All right, time. One more question. No? Is there one more? Oh, let's go in the back. We hit you already. Yeah.
So when you said that humans need to evolve with the technology in order to compare with advantage, and I agree with that. I want to, make a new a school curriculum that teaches students that can effectively use AI for their education, right? And I want to ask you, how do you think AI will impact education?
A lot. AI is a new tool that allows you to output more, right? Part of it is like, imagine tomorrow we found a new land, and that new land had a whole new language and it was filled with robots, and none of us knew how to speak that language, right? Part of this whole ChatGPT thing is we're figuring out how to speak that new language, that communication with it. So one of the areas is, in terms of education, is you got to get comfortable with the technology in order to be able to interface with that new language. That's one element. The other one is you got to understand, how does it serve you, right? And what technology? So there's different patterns of education that you can work with it. So you can use it as an assistant. So if education is so broad, right? Coding and programming, right? You could work with those programming patterns, right? Okay, create me a directory, fill in a directory, fill out these education pieces. Or in terms of writing, right? And you can go and say, hey, create me an outline of a book, fill in the outline of the books, do those types of things. Part of it is understanding, how do you want to dance with this new AI interface, right? And then part of the education is for you as the human to be, think of it as this way. Imagine that you are a boss of your education and you just got a new employee. That new employee is an AI intern, right? The AI intern, you wouldn't give an intern to your company, say, hey, here's the keys to the business, just go run it, I'm out of here later, gotta go, right? Before we got paid for a lot of the doing, right? A lot of the busy work, right? And, how many papers can I write? How many grades can I check? And what can I output? We're now moving from the doing area to the thinking, right? Being a good boss is being able to think, being able to lead, being able to guide. And then what you need to do is, for the AI intern, is you got to give them frameworks, you got to give them SOPs, you got to guide them, you got to work with them. And then as they output information, like any intern, you say, hey, you don't say, hey, intern, go make me money. You didn't make me money. You say, hey, what I want you to do is that's like the difference between saying, hey, I want you to make me money versus I want you to write me an atomic essay that's 500 words that starts with the pain and the possibility of starting a new business inside of Orange County. I want you to cite facts and figures and then give me reference documents online, aka ChatGPT, right? That's much more consistent, and then that output's going to be a lot better and a lot more consistent with that data. Now you're going to get that back and you're like, ooh, now I want you to try that in the voice of Oprah, in the voice of Elon Musk, in the voice of this, or whatever. Or I'm going to pull the transcript of Alex Hormozi from his YouTubes, grab his voice and put that on top of it. So you need to work with it until you refine it down to the model that you want. But you have to be the boss. The boss means, congratulations, you got promoted from the doing to the thinking, but now it's your job to look at it, strategize, innovate, and see the patterns, and be able to integrate those patterns into useful behaviors.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, before we let you go, we have a QR code that you're sharing with us.
That's me.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's behind the QR code and what they can get?
Yeah. So this goes to my website, Dylan J. Watkins. On here are all my links and stuff. So on here is access to my TikTok, so you can see all the TikToks.
It's great. I'll validate it.
Yay. Did that. Access to my podcast if you like more long-form content. I also have a free membership on there called ChatGPT for Me, which will bring you to my Discord. And then if you go to the Discord, inside the resource sections, I threw in a bunch of prompts, I threw a bunch of mid-journey references, a bunch of things. I just started out, so it just got started yesterday, but I have several hundred people that have signed up to be a part of my membership program from previous that we're now going to invite inwards. And then on top of that, I'm having a masterclass on AutoGPT, teaching people how to use that, coming up at the end of the month. You can sign up there. And then if you want, if you're not super technical, but you want to use the AutoGPT, you can sign up for the waiting list, because I have AutoGPT for Me, where you can sign up for the, when it becomes available in the next couple of days, we'll then shoot you an email, and then you can go sign up and go play around with that. So all the access and everything you need to get up and running with ChatGPT.
Awesome. Well, Dylan, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for being a part of our community, participating, getting involved. And let's give Dylan a round of applause.